Thank you, Rukma. Hi, everyone. I am going to start with a little story. So once upon a time, there was this team, and they had an amazing idea. They said, we are going to build a, can I swear here? Like a kick-ass product, that's what they said. So they started a company, right? They said, we know how to build products, we're going to do that. And build they did. Because they knew how to do it, they were successful, they were experienced, and then they realized they actually needed to take that product to market. And this is when the story becomes a little bit less straightforward. They tried a bunch of things, some of them worked, some of them didn't. They hired people, they lost people. You've probably heard that story before. Eventually, the time was not on their side, so they had to declare something. They did some post-mortem, and they essentially said, the product was amazing, but the market failed to respond. Now, this is not a real story, it's a fictitious story, but how many of you have heard a variation of the story before? Okay, good. I'm not the only one, thank you. By the way, the timer is not ticking, so cool, I like that. We're here for a very long time, guys. I hope you're enjoying it. The market failed to respond. This is a fictitious story, right? But the reality is this is how the story goes for way too many companies. So today we're going to talk about that, and specifically we're going to talk about go-to-market. I lead a security incubations team. This is a team where we build new products. This is where we scale products. This is where we sometimes acquire companies and build them to the scale of Microsoft. So some of that comes directly from my experience. And the reality is the story is true for 9 out of 10 startups. You may have heard this stat before. There are different variations of it. The unfortunate thing is most companies, most teams that start building something, they eventually fail. And I wanted to look a little bit deeper into why that happens. So the interesting thing that happens is for many organizations, it's not going to be the product itself that will fail. It's going to be a combination or a variation of a few things. And typically they boil down to this proverbial product market fit, some kind of marketing problems, team problems. You will notice here that tech problems are not the ones that usually lead to failure. So I always found this fascinating. And one of the amazing things that happened to all of us in product marketing is the notion of go-to-market. How many of you know what go-to-market is or have heard about it? All right, cool. So most of you know what it is. Maybe we don't need a presentation here. But the idea is really simple. So you have your idea of a product, you build it, and then you introduce this magical thing called go-to-market. You all know about it. You figure out your market, you figure out the buyer, you figure out the value proposition, and all of these amazing things. And all of a sudden, when you take this product to market, things go a lot more smoothly, right? That's the idea. Now, many of you have heard what go-to-market is. Many of you know what it is. And yet, the problem of companies failing still persists. So what I posit is that go-to-market, even when you know what it is, it doesn't always work. So what we're going to do today, we're not going to look at go-to-market specifically and what it is and how it works. We're going to look at why it doesn't work and what you can do in your jobs to make it work. Fundamentally, it all boils down to one thing. We all work hard. We all create plans. We all come up with amazing strategies. And then, using the words of some military strategists here, no campaign plan survives first contact with the enemy. Eventually, what happens is we face the reality and we need to adapt. We need to adjust. And not every company has the resources, the strengths, the wisdom, lots of the time to adapt. Let's look at what can be done differently. Well, first, I wanted to understand, personally, I'm intrigued by this stuff, right? And I wanted to understand why this happens. And if I were to boil it down to one picture, to me, this is the answer why go-to-market strategies fail. Have you seen that before in real life? So what I mean, of course, it's a metaphor, right? This is not the cause of all your problems, that particular alley. What I mean by that is that we build things. We have a certain way of thinking about how the world will unfold, how the reality will unfold. And then we touch our customers, we touch the users of our products, and we discover that the way we think about the market, the way we think about the customers, the way we think about how they're going to use those products can be different. And it doesn't have to be the right way. Sometimes people are doing things that we may firmly believe that are wrong, right? But it turns out that to customers, this is the right way of doing it. So what's a natural reaction for a human being when they see it? The first thing they do, they build a fence. They're like, don't go here. You're not supposed to go there, right? Or sometimes you would put a sign that's going to say, no walking on the grass. Or you would introduce some kind of fines, like $500 for walking on the grass. I don't want to be in that park. And yet, the fundamental issue is still there, right? So I wanted to talk about design thinking. Design thinking, again, sorry I keep asking all these questions. I'm actually curious. How many of you know what design thinking is? Good, okay, excellent. So we're in Silicon Valley. This is where design thinking was born, right? It came out of Stanford, out of the D School. And this is a practice, a school of thought, if you will, that posits that if you build your companies, if you build your products, if you build your go-to-market strategies with the human in mind, with the end user in mind, you're way more likely to succeed. And what they typically do in the process of figuring out how to get there is they understand people really well. They empathize with them. They try to understand and define the problem that they're solving. They come up with a lot of ideas that they prototype, test, and it kind of is a rinse and repeat situation where it actually never stops. Again, I wanted to look at that. I wanted to show you a few tools that you as product marketers can use in your go-to-market every day to apply design thinking and avoid some of the costly mistakes that, unfortunately, a lot of us make. Nobody's perfect. So the first thing that I wanted to start with, and this is probably the one piece of advice that I wanted to leave you with, is start early. What I mean by that is, if you look at a traditional product development methodology, and I purposefully picked a very ugly slide. This is not how I design PowerPoint, just for the, don't take photos of me in front of this. What you realize is products have been built, especially tech products have been built for decades now, right? And there's a certain way of doing it. There's a certain muscle that gets developed in companies. And this muscle usually goes around the idea of, okay, we'll have a product, we'll kind of screen it, we'll understand the ROI, we'll evaluate different ideas, build different kind of products or components, we'll evaluate them. And you see here toward the end, let's see if, yeah, toward the very end, it says start production and marketing plan. So this is when all of you get this call on a Friday evening and somebody tells you, hey, we're launching this thing in 2 weeks. You need to help us. I hear some nervous laughter in the audience. So look, I don't know about you, this breaks my heart, right? And this is not how it's supposed to be, and one of the amazing things that you can do as a product marketer is look at the entire journey of the product. Whether you, well, very simply, it's the idea, concept, solution, and market. The idea is really not for you to get involved at the very last stage. Where you want to be is at the very beginning of this journey. I'll put it differently. If you start thinking about how you want to take your product to market before you even build this product, the odds are fundamentally more in your favor. I'll give you an example. Sometimes a company may say, you know what, we don't have the money to have a sales force of 50 people. There's no way we're going to be able to pay all these people and have them go door to door to sell a product. We need some kind of company, some kind of product that will be selling itself. I'm using air quotes here. Thinking about those limitations, thinking about what you can do, what you cannot do early in the journey of a product will set you up for success. So when you get that call on Friday night, of course you'll take it, and of course you'll help it. But one of the amazing things we can do is educate our stakeholders and be there in the journey with them earlier. The second thing that I wanted to talk about is the notion of empathy. And it can be very hand-wavy, right? I recognize that. But there are actually things we can do to infuse a lot more empathy into how we think about go-to-market. Many times when we build products, many times when we think about developing strategies, teams tend to just go there and talk to customers and ask them, okay, what is it that you want? And so they listen, and typically the tip of the iceberg is what they say. So one of the things that design thinkers do is they posit that it's actually not just what people say that matters. You need to go deeper. You need to understand what they do. You need to observe that. You need to understand how they feel. And sometimes you even need to understand what they don't do, what they don't say, and how they don't feel. I'll give you one example. At P&G, where I started my career, in the 80s, we were talking to women who were doing laundry for their family, and they were saying that their biggest problem is the white collars, right? Or essentially, they couldn't remove the dirt from the collars. And so for many, many years, the company was building a product that was solving this issue, but people were unhappy. Turns out the real problem was dirty underwear, but people just didn't like to talk about it. So with a little bit of observation, with a little bit of staying with the customer and observing what is it that they do, where they spend time doing their laundry, they could have easily remedied that. So they reformulated the product, and the product worked better. So what can you do? There is a tool that I want to leave you with. It's called an empathy map. Some of you may have seen it. Some of you may have heard about it. It's super tiny. What I encourage you to do is just Google it, because you'll get a ton of different templates. Pick whichever one works for you. I don't have a strong preference, but I promise you'll get 50 different templates there. And the idea is next time you talk to your customer, next time your product managers or engineers talk to a customer, try to capture a little bit more. Not just what people do, but what is it that they see, what is it that they hear, what is it that they're actually doing, and what are the pains and the gains that they have. If you look at how you capture information from customers through this lens, if you feel compelled to fill out more information because you simply have the space for it, typically this is where you start capturing the detail that you otherwise wouldn't. The third thing that I wanted to talk about is just the idea of embracing life. Again, it's going to sound super simple, but it's an important reminder to all of us. I think in marketing, I'll just speak for myself. Like, it's very easy to get arrogant, right? It's very easy to say, I wrote this amazing paragraph. Surely people will read it, right? It's so beautiful. Why wouldn't they? And so there's a lot of that. We kind of believe that whatever we create, people are there, like sitting on the edge of their chair, waiting for it to come, right? And that actually doesn't happen that way. So here's the reminder, right? I like illustrating things visually. This is your product. This is you. Obviously, you spend 60, 70% of your time probably either thinking about this or actually doing things that are related to your professional life, to your product, to your company. Now, this is your customer's life. And we often forget, and we focus, I'm going to check if the laser pointer works. So we typically kind of look here. We focus on where the product overlaps with the customer. And we study this area to death. Now, what I want to encourage all of you is to focus here. Can all of you see the red circle? Okay. The idea is really to understand what is it that keeps people awake at night. What are the things that they like doing and not like doing on a weekend? Essentially, one of the fundamental things you can do for your business is really understand not just how your product ties into what they do, but what their life is like. I'll give you an example. In the security world, we learned that people who do security, they deal with a lot of firefighting, right? And not surprisingly, they don't like working on weekends. So a lot of the work that we're doing is there to make sure that people don't need to leave their families on Saturday night because they need to be in the office responding to an incident. We can notify them more effectively. We can automate things and assign tasks more effectively. And we help them stay at home so they don't need to leave their families on a Saturday. Just one of the many examples of what you can do to really make a difference. What can you do in terms of the tools? Again, I'll leave you with one that I use a lot, and many of you may have heard about it. It's called Customer Journey Map. And you probably saw different variations of it. There could be basic, that don't have to be basic. The idea is really to look at any process. It doesn't have to be about a customer using your product specifically. It can be about the way they spend their morning, or maybe how they get to work. And maybe somewhere there's something about your product. But it's those highlights and lowlights in the lives of a customer you really want to understand. And again, I would imagine that you learn as much, if not more, if you go outside of the context of your product and learn about other areas of their life. Again, Google this, lots of different variations. You can be as scientific and precise or as creative about it as you want. The idea is really to go there, break down their life into meaningful chunks and understand what the highlights and lowlights are. The fourth one is, so I wasn't here for the beginning of the session. Have anybody spoken about personas today? Okay, good. So I knew this would happen, and probably people are rolling their eyes and saying, here we go again, another guy talking about personas. But here's the unfortunate thing, right? Every time I go and speak to companies, 95% of the time, they either don't have personas at all, or they'll just tell me, oh yeah, we have this thing, we did this project 2 years ago, there's a 50-slide deck that's somewhere, we'll dig it up for you. And so sure enough, they dust it off and nobody uses it, right? I believe in this. I believe that it helps. And to me, a one-pager as simple as this, that's on the desk of every person in the company, be it a seller, be it a marketer, be it a product person or an engineer, is more valuable than a 50-page deck that came after a $300,000 study that nobody is using. I will actually demonstrate why I believe in it and why I think it's a great idea. So you all know Allspice. I was lucky enough to work on this brand when we were rebranding it over 10 years ago at this point. And the interesting thing we learned as we were going through the rebranding is we had always been advertising to men because, well, they're the users, right? And what we discovered is in more than 50% of situations, it's women who buy deodorant for men. It's wives, it's girlfriends, it's mothers sometimes. So what do you do with that? Surprisingly, there's a lot of inertia and a lot of inclination within companies to say, yeah, we kind of know that, yeah, it's unfortunate, and you kind of go on with your life, right? You do whatever you were used to doing. I'm obviously biased, right? The cool thing about this campaign is while it appeals to men, it was actually directed at women. It was there to entertain women. It was there to make the product appealing to women. The imagery that you see, the characters, it was all directed at women. So we actually had to confront ourselves and think, okay, what are we going to do about the fact that women are actually buying deodorant, not men? So this is just one example of when you have the personas and you actually use them. So we talked about personas. I'll take this a little bit farther. Map all your stakeholders, right? Naturally, you will think about that one person who buys your product, who uses your product. But sometimes the buyer and the user are not the same people, as we clearly illustrated previously. Sometimes there are people who influence those who buy products, right? None of that should be new to you. Like, let's say if you buy clothes, maybe there is a significant other who helps you pick disclose. Maybe there is a fashion advisor or like an editor in a magazine who will tell you this is what's in and this is what's out these days, right? Mapping out those stakeholders across the entire journey when you buy a product can lead you to interesting ideas. Again, it sounds super trivial, I understand that. Let me give you an example that will hopefully do a better job of explaining it. How many of you had a Yamaha piano at home when you grew up? Oh, wow, it's like 15-ish people, impressive. Yeah, so obviously the leader in the market. Wasn't the case about 70 years ago when they started building it. Naturally, Yamaha builds like musical instruments, but they also build engines and motorcycles and everything in between, right? So what did they think of? They said, there's no way we're going to build a piano that we'll be selling to a pro. First of all, the pro already has a piano, right? And the next time they're going to buy one will be 30 years from today. So we might as well forget that. Who is it who's in the market pretty much every year? And the kind of market that replenishes itself. They realize it's kids, it's students who take music lessons. And this is where probably you got acquainted with Yamaha. So naturally they said, okay, we will not be building an instrument for a pro that really influences how we're going to build it, the kind of quality, the kind of standards, and all of the pricing. The next thing they said, okay, kids naturally don't buy a piano themselves. It's a pretty expensive purchase. It's the parents who do that. And how do you influence a parent? And this is where they discovered if a parent knows a thing or two about a piano, if they're a musician, they probably already have an instrument. Again, this is not our story. We need someone who knows nothing about the piano. And those people usually go and ask for advice where? At a piano dealership, right? So this is the beauty of Yamaha's go-to-market strategy. They built a product that is extremely easy to maintain, easy to open, easy to tune, easy to perform all sorts of maintenance things, so that a piano maintenance person spends twice as little time actually maintaining a Yamaha as compared to a German instrument. So what does it mean for a dealership? They don't actually sell as many piano instruments as they make money servicing instruments, right? And when you have an instrument that allows you to service twice as many customers at any given day, of course you're going to recommend that. So they built an instrument for a piano technician that eventually captured the market. That's the Yamaha story. Prototype growth is the next one. And typically in your job, I don't know about you actually, in my job, whenever I start in a new role, I'm pretty much expected to build like a jet, a massive plane, like an amazing demand generation engine, build 50 types of content, web campaigns, like different kind of events, and everything in between. And I need to acquire 50,000 customers in the first quarter. Like this is the expectation from us as marketers, that we go there and we conquer the world. If you do it the way designers or design thinkers do it, you'll break the problem down into the smaller chunks. And you will learn that what you actually need to do is not necessarily one of those massive jets. It's more of a golf cart. And yes, eventually it will have bigger wheels. Yes, eventually it will be able to fit more people. But it will grow over time. You don't need to solve that problem today. You don't need to solve that problem in the next few weeks. So what you do is actually prototype. You decide what are the problems that you can solve today, and you define the different ways in which you can solve these problems. What it can look like is you can, for example, decide, okay, I have a new company, new product. How can we give it to someone who's going to use it for free? Then how am I going to sell 5 at a massive, massive discount? Then how can I sell 20 items of this product and get amazing reviews? And you kind of get the idea. Eventually you go with 50, maybe you don't want to use sales, you'll have a more scalable motion. Then maybe you'll want to upsell the existing 50, and maybe then you want to take those 100 customers and attract 500 more. Again, this is not a precise picture, but the idea is to experiment at a smaller scale, because this is where you probably will get a lot more knowledge and a lot more data. The last piece of advice I have is about educating and re-educating your stakeholders. It's amazing that we're all here today, we're learning. What I find unfortunate sometimes is that my product managers and my engineers are not in the same room with me, learning about all of these amazing things. And I also find it unfortunate that in, let's say, the product management space, there are a lot of different frameworks, methodologies, templates, and whatnot. So there's a lot more trust in the process. There's a lot more trust in how things get done. And this is not often the case in product marketing. So whether it is design thinking and the different tools you're applying, whether it's the things that you learn through Product Marketing Alliance, they're all amazing, and they're going to be even more amazing when you socialize them with your team, when you build their trust, when you actually signal to them that there's a lot of depth, a lot of process, or a lot of thought that goes into how you think about go-to-market and product marketing broadly. So there you have it. I have 7 things. Start early, empathize, embrace life. I'm reading this. Actually use personas, map stakeholders, prototype growth, and re-educate. I'm leaving you with a few tools that you can Google and find some good examples. And with that, thank you.
Thank you, Misha. That was amazing. While we wait for the Slido to come up, are there any questions in the room? Okay, this is the lunch carbs hitting, it looks like. Oh, there we go.
Earlier you said you found out this issue at, which company was it? The very first company that you worked for. The collar,
Yeah.
you thought there was an issue with the collar, but then it turned out that was underwear, undies,
Yep.
right? How'd you find that when customers were not willing to share in the first place? How'd you make them share?
Yeah, if you couldn't hear the question was, all right, so you discovered that there was a problem between what people were saying and what they actually were dealing with laundry detergents, right? How do you find that out? I think the unfortunate thing is you typically find this out when you start failing. When you do all these improvements, when you spend time and money on R&D, and you do not see any uptick, you do not see any results. The first thing you'll see, again, in technology, you may be introducing a bunch of new things, but your net promoter score isn't going up. So maybe you didn't prioritize the right thing. So the sad thing is sometimes you need to deal with very, very bad consequences, and you need to essentially look at your assumptions before you made the changes, recognize that the assumptions were wrong, and then start exploring again. You go back and talk to customers. In that particular case, I think they actually hired a company that helped them go through an ethnographic study and be there with customers and actually see what is it they do, where they spend money. And this is where they non-verbally understood what that issue was. Yeah.
All right, we'll take a question from the Slido. Sorry, we're going to need someone to vote it back up. But the question was around how do you evangelize the value or the importance of applying design thinking to product marketing to your cross-functional or marketing teams?
Yeah. I have no problem talking to people about it. Very few people in my close circle at work know this or have done this in the past. Robert, who worked with me in one of the previous companies, I actually did a presentation at a previous company where I spoke about this. Like these days, we're building one of the new products, and we're actually going to start with some of the persona work that wasn't part of the plan before. I think the most difficult thing in our work is knowing the right thing, what the right thing to do is, and then actually doing it. And I think there's no other way. You really need to go there. You need to show it to people. You need to invite people to your presentations or share the links with them. Gaining their trust and sharing that knowledge are one of the most difficult things in our work.